Yo, what's up? So hopefully this video is going to be a bit more hinged than what I posted on Twitter yesterday, and as you can see, it's an Alphamon deck profile. I just have all the cards, well, all the Digimon cards lined up already because I think it'll make it easier for me to do a few explanations like this. The only thing missing would be the four Digitama, which are just Doraemon. So I'm going to run through the ratios right quick, and then we're going to talk a bit about the cards. So we got 4 copies of the BT-7 Doraemon, 4 copies of BT-8 Ryudomon, 3 copies of BT-9 Doraemon. That's our level 3s. Our level 4s are 4 copies of Darugamon, 4 copies of Dexdarugamon, and 4 copies of Darugamon, 3 copies of Dexdarugamon, and 2 copies of Ginryumon for 9 level 4s total. Our level 5s are 4 copies of Greatmon. Might be a little bit hard to see, but there is a fourth one right there. 2 copies of Hisiaryumon, and 1 copy of Doro Greatmon, because of course this card is limited. And for our level 6s, we have 2 BT-6 Alphamon, 2 BT-9 Alphamon, and 3 Oryumon. For our level 7s, I have 3 copies of Alphamon Oryugen. You absolutely can just run with 2 of these. I just happened to pull a third one, and from playing around with it, I ended up liking it, so that's what I've stuck with. But I was playing with 2 copies for such a long time that, like, there's literally just like a particular line of play that I can do with a third one, and that's pretty much the only reason I keep this. You absolutely do not need a third one if you're playing this deck, in my opinion. But yeah, so the strangest things here are probably by level 5 and level 4 lineup, but I want to talk a bit about Doraemon. So this card is a card I really don't like. I would much rather run 4 copies of the security Doraemon, but we didn't have it until recently, and I just haven't picked my copies up yet. So I would totally replace these 3 with it, and I might like swap a card out to run a fourth one. It's just like it does trash a card and it draws you to its filter, but I feel like you don't really need this card that much because you have a tamer in this deck that helps you draw a lot of cards. And I'm actually not talking about Cool Boy, I'm talking about Yuji. So we have 4 copies of Yuji as well. I don't know where to put him, but I will read one of him off. It says, when one of your Digimon with X antibody in its traits is moved from the breeding area to your battle area, gain 1 memory and draw 1. Then it says, your turn, when one of your black Digimon with X antibody in its traits attacks, you may suspend this tamer to place 1 card with X antibody in its traits from your hand under that Digimon as its bottom Digivolution card. So this deck focuses around manipulating your sources, right? And if you get multiple copies of Yuji out, like on the turn that you move something out of the raising area, you immediately draw a few cards, right? Thanks to Yuji, and you gain some memory. So like this is just super duper impactful, and usually is how I get to a lot of my pieces. And the thing with Alphamon is Yuji is such a good card that it incentivizes you to promote stuff early, even if the stack just happens to die. That's like perfectly fine. And I've seen a lot of people that play Alphamon struggle with this. They'll play these down, but they won't move out, and then they won't get any value off of them. It's okay to lose stacks. You can actually recur your sources somehow. Mainly this guy. Um, it's not that bad. But I'll just put Yuji off to the side for now. So that's the reasoning behind that. I just really don't like the card. I felt like when I was running it at 4 copies, I was running it out of necessity, and I never really wanted to play it. Like, there were some instances where I'm like, oh, if I play this now, I can do a particular combo on my turn. So having like maybe 1 or 2 copies of it, I think is okay, but I really would prefer to not run that card whatsoever. Level 4 wise, it probably seems very weird that I'm only running 3 copies of Dex Daruga when I'm running 4 Daruga. But the thing about this card is, if you ever Digivolve directly into it, if you do it in the raising area, that's just a 3 memory. You can't use its effect, right? And you're kind of putting yourself on the back foot sometimes by doing that. Because, like, sure, this doesn't have a Wind Digivolving effect, but it does Digivolve for 2, right? this thing's main value is its wind digivolving effects. One of them only activates if you digivolve from trash or if it digivolves directly on Darugamon. So I just kind of wanted to like minimize bricks. Like this card is good and I do want to utilize it, but I don't want to see it as frequently as I would see a 4 of. And I also just wanted more 2 cost level 4 evolutions. So that's why Ginryumon's here. But Ginryumon's also here because I came to find that there are absolutely matchups where you just want to sit on Oryukin and have blocker. And Genryumon gives blocker, so that's what it's here for. Level 5's wise, this is at 1. Grademon is kind of an insane card, in my opinion. So, back in BT9, I played into a decent bit of D Reaper, and I think I won all of those games. And at the time, people kept telling me I was getting lucky because Alphamon has a really bad D Reaper matchup, and that wasn't it at all. I was winning those games largely because of Grademon. So, Grademon, for those you don't know, says when digivolving, reveal the top 3 cards of your deck. Add 1 card with Alphamon and its name among them to your hand, and place 1 card with X antibody and its traits among them under this Digimon as its bottom Digivolution card. Trash the rest. So another reason I like this card and don't like this one is because this sets up the trash if you care about it or need something trashed for these Alphamons, right? But it also just straight up shoves a card in its sources. If it shoves a Dorumon off the top, you will immediately gain that memory, right? If it shoves a Darugamon off the top, that's extra DP. All of these things are pretty impactful. And then on top of that, its inheritable is super duper good as well. It says if this Digimon has Alphamon in its name, end of attack. If the Digimon has Alphamon in its name, delete one of your opponent's Digimon with a play cost of 5 or less. So this is the reason I was able to play very well into D Reaper. Because a lot of the bodies that they put on board would be really small cost wise, and that would just let me get rid of them. The end of attack effect also is not once per turn, so if you happen to swing twice with an Alphamon, which you can do thanks to Oryumon, you would be able to proc that multiple times. If you had 2 Grademons in sources, you'd be able to delete 4 Digimon. It's pretty good. Hisiaryumon is also nuts. Like this card alone is why I usually don't have an issue if I face into Examon. So it says when one of your effects places a Digivolution card under this Digimon, you may Digivolve this Digimon into a Digimon card in your hand with X antibody and its traits by paying its Digivolution cost. That is the same word a lot. When this Digimon would Digivolve with this effect, reduce the Digivolution cost by 1. So basically what this means is if this thing is on your board, right, and you have a Yuji out, you attack with this. Yuji can then suspend itself to shove a card under it. His Hisiaryumon's effect will activate, allowing you to Digivolve into an Alphamon. If you go into the BT9 Alphamon, you can also potentially shove a Dorumon, gaining an extra memory, basically Digivolving into this thing for a memory cost of 1, right? And then you also get to de-Digivolve one of your opponent's Digimon. Doing that against Examon is super duper impactful. Like, I've had Exa players just, when I move this out, declare the effect, and I would ask them, are you sure you want to do that? And I would explain what this does, and they do it anyway, and they're like, I don't care, your Digimon's gonna die. I go into Alphamon, I BT9 one specifically, I shove something, I Digivolve their Examon. Now their Examon usually can still block because it has like the inheritable sources, but it's usually been reduced to a level 5 body, so it only has 7k DP and they don't want to risk that, right? It's super duper good. And even outside of that, there are some other combos that you can do with it. I just really like the card. Sometimes it comes up, and also just having reboot along with having blocker is really, really nice. Um, BT6 Alpha, I was actually on 4 copies of for a really long time, and I kind of want to go back to doing that eventually if it's at all possible. But this card says security at the end of the battle, add this card to your hand. So it does battle, then goes to your hand regardless of the outcome. And then if a Digimon with Royal Knight or X antibody and its type is in play, up to 12 of your opponent's Digimon can't attack players for the turn. This card absolutely has saved me by effectively being a stronger Kongo. In a sense, if my opponent's able to put bodies on board after this effect resolves, they can still attack because they weren't targeted by this. but I've been able to like delay D Brigade. Like actually, there was one game where D Brigade checked two of these in a row, like two different turns in a row, and I don't think I was at risk of losing on those turns because their boards weren't super duper wide. But if they were, this would have been amazing. I've seen this checked against Bloom. I've seen it checked against Crossheart. So against Crossheart, it absolutely did matter. Well, no, it did matter. I was gonna say it mattered less, but it mattered because they had a bunch of level fours on board, and they were forced to digicross them instead of swinging with them first. So you know, I think this card is really, really solid, but it's not absolutely needed. It's basically a tech choice that gives me a bit of flexibility, honestly, so it's really up to you. But I think, like, for now, going 2-2 or, like, 2-3 is probably the correct way. 3 Oryumon. So Oryumon has end of attack. If the Digimon has Alphamon in its name, unsuspend it as it's inheritable. So that's why how you would be getting multiple swings off. And it's also something that synergizes with the BT-6 Alphamon because it has when attacking. You may pay up to 5 memory. If you do, the Digimon gains plus 1k DP for the turn for each memory paid. So you can actually just make him really big and safe into security. But it also has end of attack, gain 2 memory. So swing twice with him, gain 4, and then reboot with this, have blocker with this. Pretty good board state, allows you to develop your board further or maybe play some tech choice options. It's pretty good. Or you can, when Digivolving, it deletes all your opponent's Digimon with the highest play cost. So if they have like 2 20 cost things out, I think the only thing with that cost is Death X. It'll just pop both of them immediately. And then it has end of your turn. You may return up to 7 non-DGA cards with X antibody and their traits from this Digimon's Digivolution cards to the bottom of your deck in any order. And if you do, gain 1 memory for each card returned. So oftentimes people will Digivolve into this and immediately use that effect instead of ending their turn. And that's fine actually, but do be mindful that you can use this effect to your advantage more so depending on what you're playing against, right? Because you might be better off letting the turn pass, right? Let's say you put your opponent on 1 or 2 in the process. They don't have a memory set or tamer or something like that. It's fine. Maybe put them on 3. Still, it's fine. It comes back to you. You still have this thing on the board. You swing with it. Let's say you're against a blue deck. They have stuff like Hammer Spark and Ice Walls. So maybe you check them in security and your turn would end normally, right? But now it doesn't have to because you can bot deck your sources. The other thing about this is I think people oftentimes just shove all their sources back under the deck because it's a way to gain memory and continue doing plays, of course. But the big thing about Alphamon, right? The thing that matters about Alphamon is having sources to give it effects and utility. It's very similar to Hisiaryumon in that way. It's just that this deck builds up a stack directly, whereas Hisiaryumon might not necessarily do that. Hisiaryumon might be hard playing more. In any case, this card is super duper good. One reason that I run 3 copies of this is because sometimes I will shove one of the ones from the trash under the BT-9 Alphamon with its own effect, and then I'll Digivolve into another one, and that lets me just put a whole Alphamon line at the bottom of my deck, right? The top card will be a level 3, then a level 4, then a level 5, then a level 6, then the other level 6, and then the 7, right? Usually in the process of digivolving, once I get to that level 3, I'll just be able to go up the whole line all at once. And it also helps us to not deck out in the matchups where that matters. So it's pretty good. I'm going to leave a few cards out here because there is a little combo thing I want to show off. So you're relevant, you're relevant. We want one of you, we want you. And we want UJ. And we want Dormon, actually. Now, I hope this is useful for anyone who just wants a Alphamon deck profile, even though I haven't really topped a large event with it. I do believe this list is pretty similar to, I forget his name, I'll link it in the description, but someone topped one of the Eggman events, I believe. I think it was a regional. I feel like it was a regional. With Alphamon, and we had pretty similar deck considerations. So, first off, let's options. We have 1 X antibody, 1 final Zubagon punch. I would be running 2 copies of this, but I just don't have a second one, so I'm running Congo instead. I have 2 Breath of the Gods. We're running 3 Cool Boy, which probably seems blasphemous to some people, and then I'm on the 1 Coda. We already went over Yuji. Cool Boy is nice. I reduced this to 3 copies, both because I'm not running that many of the Dex cards, and it's usually just really easy to swap this out for Black Memory Boost when I want to, so that's the deal with this. Like, it comes up, it matters, it absolutely, like, putting this on board is nice because it's a way to choke your opponent very early and it still searches you pieces, so I don't mind having it. Oftentimes against BWG, they'll delete this. Like, if I get multiples of these out, they'll delete this over deleting Yuji. And, like, it can matter. It can matter, but I feel like a lot of times I don't care about this being deleted. So there's that. But yeah, that card goes off even once usually you've, like, put yourself in a position to win the game. So I feel like it should probably get limited to 2 or something. But personally, I'm probably not going to be running this card a whole lot longer. 1 copy of Coda. I was running it at 2, but I wanted to make space for other cards, and memory setting I think isn't that necessary as long as you establish a UG or 2, so I'm pretty fine with this. Breath of the Gods is for a few reasons, because like I mentioned, you oftentimes do want to be able to establish sources on your Alphamon, I think, to just be able to sit on board with it. This thing gives it reboot when you don't have reboot from Hisiaryumon, and on top of that, it prevents it from being DP reduced or returned to the owner's hand or deck, so this is just really good against blue matchups that aren't Exa, because I feel like Hisiaryu helps me deal with that enough as is. But yeah, this has come up dealing with Imperial and Armor Rush because they run what's the card? Gigadeath. Some of them are on Megadeath. Is it Megadeath? Yeah, no, Megadeath and Gigadeath. Yeah. So yes, most are on Megadeath, some are on Gigadeath. This helps with both of those, and this also helps with a couple of other decks that would bounce stuff. And these are also just really useful sometimes if you know your opponent has access to bounce and you want to keep your level 5 or lower on board or whatever, to just play this down and protect it. It also lets you potentially like swing into one of their smaller bodies and then play this after to pass turn. So you unsuspend, so they'd have to like attack with something that can attack unsuspendeds, which is usually a red specific thing. And you get some effect protection. This thing is also just really useful sometimes because if you pair it into yellow, this prevents chaos degradation from doing anything, and also that other yellow option that I don't want to mispronounce the name of. Final Zubagon Punch, I primarily wanted to run because not only does it give you some offensive pressure by giving you an extra security attack, but it gives you blocker and reboot. So on subsequent turns of just having your Oryuken out, you can give it 3k DP extra for one thing, blocker and reboot. And the DP actually did matter a lot into War Greymon. It mattered a little into BWG. It came up. There were instances where I just really wish I would have had a second copy of this card, but Congo ended up putting in enough work that I didn't mind working with these ratios. I did run X Antibody at more copies at one point in the past, and I could totally see running it at 2 again, but I think running it at 1 is fine. All that said, let's talk about the combos. So let's say our board is this, right? We had Hisiaryumon in the back, we moved it out, so I guess we actually should build up a full stack for it. So let's say we went into a Doromon and oh, not you, a Genryumon. So we don't have the optimal stack here necessarily, right? We have one with blocker and reboot, which is cool, but it's not the one that people would conventionally go for, and that's okay. So we move this out. Yuji draws us a card and gains us a memory, right? And we find ourselves in an awkward position. What we can do is shove X Antibody. This effect is a you may, not you must, so you can choose not to activate this yet. But because you shoved it, it does trigger your Digitama, so you draw another card, right? And then you can swing. So if you attack in this position, you get to do a couple of things. You spin Yuji for one thing, so you get to shove Oryumon from your hand into your sources. This, again, would trigger the Hisiaryumon, allowing it to digivolve into an Alphamon for one less memory, so for two. So if somehow your opponent passed you on one and then Yuji gave you an extra memory, right? You'd currently be at 0 memory, but then Alphamon gets to shove a card from your trash under it as a bottom source, so you're more than likely going to have a Doromon in trash, and that would gain you a memory, putting you back to 1. Right? In addition, this is going to de-digivolve one of your opponent's Digimon, and because the X antibody card was in your sources at the moment that you initiated the attack, you just waited to resolve everything else first. You can now use its effect to digivolve into Alphamon or Ryukin for a cost of 3. So for a total of 4 memory, you went from a level 5 to a level 7. This thing is going to wipe everything on your opponent's board. If you really want to, you can use its end of turn effect to bot deck some of the sources. So you could bot deck this. So this is end of attack. So actually, how this will work is we started on 1 memory. Yuji put us to 2. This evolution costs 2. We regained 1 from the Doromon, right? Wait, what was the order for this? Yeah, this was the correct order. So we were at 1 memory, and then we paid 3 to go into this. This normally costs 7, but when you have Oryumon in sources and you're digivolving on an Alphamon, it goes down to 3. So our opponent would be on 2 memory. So what we could do here is end of attack first. Oryumon is going to unsuspend. Then the end of turn effect of Alphamon is going to activate, so we can bot deck 2 sources to gain 2 memory. So we go back to 0, right? And then we once again can attack safely because we have reboot and blocker in our inheritables. So we swing, and let's say end of turn, we play another Yuji the pass turn, putting our opponent at 3. The end of turn effect is once per turn, so you can't use it again. It just extends your turn, basically. But on our opponent's turn, we'll unsuspend because of reboot. We now have a 16k blocker, right? And then on our next turn, we can do the interaction again because Alphamon can still swing twice. This also insulates us in black matchups because there are other black decks that can devolve us, but if they devolve Alphamon, it'll go down to level 6 because we didn't get rid of all of our sources, right? So it's pretty good. I think there are maybe a few other technical play things that'll come up in a couple of matches, but I tried my best to cover as much as I can. So I hope this is useful for everyone in general, really, but I mainly did make this because a friend of mine asked me to show them my deck list, so I figured I might as well give them some explanation on how to play it as well. I also do apologize again for the glare. If I recorded this earlier in the day, I probably could have just opened my window or something rather than using my ceiling light. And I hope I don't sound too awful. My throat hurts a little bit from trying to record too much stuff the past few days. Peace out, everybody. Have a good day.